Long Live Walter Jameson is an expertly understated story that puts realistic implications onto its extraordinary premise. Charles Beaumont wrote this episode, and his trademark darker leanings are evident in its underlying themes and principles. It also featured some clever makeup effects by William Tuttle that hold up incredibly well. While shooting this episode, The Twilight Zone finally debuted on TV. It was a bit of a slow go for a while, but it eventually became a mainstay for CBS. Critics immediately loved it, and it curiously gained favor with a very young audience. All of their hard work was riding on the reception of the debut episode, but that obviously didn't affect their work with this production, as it's a quality entry in the series for several reasons. College history professor Walter Jameson is a captivating lecturer with uncanny, in-depth knowledge of the subject he teaches. His friend and colleague Sam Kittredge has a daughter named Susanna that Walter is engaged to. Kittredge invites Jameson to his house for dinner, where they have a long gestating conversation about Walter's background, including a question Sam has been apprehensively anxious to ask. Just how old is Walter Jameson? Most famously known for his starring role in the classic 1956 sci-fi horror film Invasion of the Body Snatchers, Kevin McCarthy plays Walter Jameson in this episode with the subtle gravitas needed to pull off such a mysterious and weighty role.
Let me read you a few extracts from the diary of Major Skelton. The date is Tuesday, September 11th, 1864. Sherman was drunk with victory. He himself started the awful fires. The fires that destroyed that great citadel of grace and beauty.
He's a very enigmatic presence in the first half of the episode, as his tit-for-tat conversations with Sam about marrying his daughter bring a real captivating aspect to their back and forth.
All right, I'm 51. Too old for Susanna, is that it?
In a sense.
The fact that they're playing chess just ups the atmosphere. The conversation then turns to aging in general, after Sam starts comparing his degrading features to that of Walter.
In 12 short years, I've turned into an old man, while you haven't aged at all.
Edgar Staley plays Sam Kittredge with such a great sense of intelligence. He had a full career into his old age, and was even on the Tales of Tomorrow episode, What You Need, which we covered in our review of the Twilight Zone version. Here, he wants his friend to know that he's onto him. Sam circles Jameson before bringing out some evidence that may prove Walter is not who he says he is. There are two big reveals in this episode, so we're getting to the twist section with a lot more story to explain. Sam shows Walter a picture of the Civil War major that he read the diary of in his history class. Jameson looks exactly like him, down to the ring he wears and mole on his face. At first, Walter denies it, but Sam is persistent, especially since this is the guy that's about to marry his daughter.
You and I have been very close for 12 years. You are that man in the photograph, aren't you?
Yes.
Walter is over 2,000 years old. Long ago, his fear of death was so great that he paid an alchemist to experiment on him. After being in a coma for many weeks, he awoke alone, but from that point on, he no longer aged. Then we hear about his regrets. Walter has had to watch all those around him die, including his own children. An old man himself, Sam envies Jameson, but the history professor who lived through the subject he's teaching says it's not all it's cracked up to be.
It's death that gives this world its point. We love a rose because we know it'll soon be gone.
Walter says he's lived for so long that he wants to die, but lacks the courage to end his own life. He's had many close calls over the centuries, but death never came.
I thought if a man lived forever, he'd grow wiser. But that isn't true, is it?
You just go on living, that's all.
From here, Sam's concern turns to his daughter. He knows that Walter has been married many times and doesn't want Susanna to see her husband leave when she becomes too old. Apparently, Walter tried to resign and move away 6 months prior because he could tell Susanna was falling in love with him. It was Sam who convinced him to stay, and now, despite all his experiences, Jameson can't bring himself to leave the girl.
I can't let you marry my daughter.
And why not?
Against Sam's wishes, Walter tells Susanna that they're getting married tonight. He'll return in 15 minutes to pick her up. Earlier, we saw an elderly woman spying on Walter, and after he heads home, Jameson is confronted by her in his house. This is his last wife, Lorette. She knows him as Tommy Beaumont, and saw his new engagement picture that was in the paper.
Now you're going to marry someone else and leave her the way you left me. I can't let you marry her, Tommy. You're mine.
She then grabs the revolver Walter keeps in his desk.
Tommy, it's wrong. You can't go on hurting people.
Walter is shot and Lorette leaves. Sam enters the house after hearing the noise across the street. He arrives to see Walter rapidly aging. Jameson seems to be welcoming his fate.
Nothing lasts forever. Thank God.
Susanna comes in to investigate, and although her father tries to keep her from the site, she sees Walter's empty suit, dust, where his body once was.
Dad, what is that on the floor?
Dust. Only dust.
The episode ends there with the long overdue and merciful death of Walter Jameson. Estelle Winwood played Lorette with an almost sympathetic demeanor. She kind of picks up on the fact that her Tommy is wary of his unnaturally long life and ends it when he couldn't. That mix of sympathy, revenge, and protection of any future woman he might leave made for an appropriate example of Walter's long history finally coming back to bite him. The acting across the board here was really good, and the slow story pacing and minimal setup made this a focused, engaging watch. The director, Anton Leader, credited here as Tony Leader, would return for one more episode in the third season. Probably the most memorable and impressive part of this installment are the aging effects. The first one, showing the age lines appear on McCarthy's face, are amazing. They accomplished this by applying red makeup and lighting the scene with the same color. To reveal the full look, they switched the lighting to green, which brought out the appearance of instant aging. Of course, this is really only effective in black and white, but it looks so good. It's an example of the effective ingenuity that can be accomplished through practical effects. This technique was used before in other big film projects of the time period and still looks great today. The other two makeup stages were made with a life cast of McCarthy's face and also look pretty convincing, but it's that first stage that's the most stunning. Credit to the makeup department, specifically William Tuttle, for their amazing work. Long Live Walter Jameson is a high-grade Charles Beaumont-written episode of the show. You should definitely check it out when you have some time. Although, time works a little differently in the Twilight Zone.